On YouTube there are numerous videos discussing whether Russia will break up in separate states, and if so, what that might look like. Indeed, the war in Ukraine has plunged Russia into a severe crisis, and there are reasons to speculate about various negative consequences and scenarios for Russia's future. One of these scenarios is the possible dissolution of the Russian Federation into separate parts. And today we will explore several reasons why the breakup of Russia appears to be an unlikely scenario. Firstly, it's important to note that Russia is not the Soviet Union. While many people easily extrapolate from the experience of the Soviet Union's collapse, the situation here is entirely different. Often when a major country experiences a global crisis, the assumption is that it will disintegrate. However, the situation with Russia could be considered quite the opposite. The Soviet Union consisted of 15 republics that formerly comprised the Soviet state. These republics had dominant ethnic groups, and even Soviet newspapers were published in 15 different national languages. In all of these republics, Russians were ethnic minorities. In principle, there were a clear understanding of national entities within defined borders. Furthermore, according to the Soviet constitution, which was never truly adhered to, these national republics had the right to secede from the USSR. In other words, the international community more or less understood the boundaries within which these entities existed, making their recognition relatively straightforward. Additionally, there were the Baltic republics, which later became independent Baltic countries. The Soviet occupation of the Baltic states was not recognized by many Western democracies, which believed that these states had a legitimate right to independence that should be restored. Even the Ukrainian and Belarusian Soviet Socialist republics within the USSR were members of the United Nations with limited sovereignty. They had separate seats and votes within the United Nations. So a significant part of the former Soviet republics had at least limited international subjectivity, and many of them had historical experience with statehood that they sought to restore. For example, the Baltic countries had been independent states for a considerable period between the two world wars. And even before the establishment of the Soviet Union in 1922, there were early versions of these independent states. For example, there were entities like the Georgian Democratic Republic, the First Armenian Republic, or the Belarusian People's Republic. So when the Soviet Union was disintegrating, two conditions were present. First, the 15 republics were in general reasonably understandable entities where corresponding ethnic groups predominated. Second, they had both international and internal subjectivity. They had some limited recognition from the world stage, and even according to the Soviet constitution, they had the right to secede from the Soviet Union. Russia's regions do not have any international subjectivity. Moreover, the ethnic composition of the vast majority of Russia's regions is different. Russia is predominantly populated by ethnic Russians. Even in many of those national republics within Russia which have autonomy, there is a titular nation, but it does not dominate everywhere. For example, in the Republic of Buryatia, ethnic Buryats make up only 29% of the population, while ethnic Russians are the dominant ethnic group. A similar situation exists in other regions, where the national majority not belonging to the Russian nation constitutes less than 50% of the population. Therefore, we do not have a situation similar to the final years of the Soviet Union, where there were these 15 national republics with a dominant specific ethnicity, limited international subjectivity, a history of statehood, and a right to secede from the Soviet Union according to the constitution. The republics of the North Caucasus is indeed predominantly populated by non-Russian ethnicities. It's often discussed that there might be a demand for secession from Russia in the North Caucasus, similar to Chechen's attempts in the early 90s to break away from Russia. It's believed that for some reason all North Caucasian republics should behave similar to Chechnya and attempt to create their own states. However, the situation in Chechnya and other North Caucasian republics is very diverse. For example, the Republic of Ingushetia. In Soviet times it was part of the Chechen-Ingush Autonomous Republic. When separatists led by Dudayev in Chechnya demanded independence, Ingushetia immediately declared itself a separate republic that wanted to remain within the Russian Federation. Ingushetia has no desire to be absorbed by Chechnya and has always advocated staying within the Russian Federation. Recently, when Ramzan Kadyrov attempted to reach an agreement with Ingushetia about the redistribution of territory in his favor, there were significant protests where residents of Ingushetia demonstrated their stance that they did not want to become part of Chechnya under Kadyrov's control. Another example is North Ossetia, which is a republic with a predominantly Christian population, and its residents are Orthodox Christians. The republic is situated in a frequently hostile Muslim environment, and there have been quite a few conflicts with neighboring Islamic nations. So for instance, if they were to become an independent state, it would be more challenging for them, as they would exist in a hostile environment. The most complex case is undoubtedly Dagestan, where there is a vast number of ethnic groups and nationalities. Maintaining an inter-ethnic balance among them, ensuring that one ethnicity does not monopolize power or push others away from politics, access to power, and economic opportunities is a difficult task. Therefore, Russia's withdrawal from these territories and granting them independent status would likely lead to the same conflicts, as seen in Chechnya and Ingushetia in the early 1990s, when the republic essentially split in two. Consequently, many people there advocate for remaining within Russia, because secession could disrupt this delicate ethnic balance, leading to conflicts and potentially even wars. Another problem is that these republics are largely the result of years of rule not only by the centralized Russian dictatorship, but also by local officials' dictatorship. As a result, they have very weak economies that are highly dependent on Moscow and financial subsidies from Russia. Many people genuinely fear that seceding from Russia would result in significant economic losses, and they would be unable to sustain themselves without financial support from Russia. In Tatarstan, the Tatar ethnicity is indeed in the majority. At the time of the Soviet Union's dissolution, when Russia had just become an independent state, there were many discussions about whether Tatarstan might also attempt to secede. Much like Chechnya, many in Moscow were concerned about this possibility. However, the political elite managed to reach an agreement through negotiations to establish broad autonomy in Tatarstan, which was rigorously adhered to. Recently, there was a debate regarding the removal of the position of the president of Tatarstan. For a long time, the president of Tatarstan staunchly resisted this initiative and was the last to accept changes to the constitution. Eventually, he agreed to these constitutional amendments. However, he retains the title Rey, which is used to refer to the head of the Republic of Tatarstan, essentially meaning that he still remained the president. This action showed Moscow that the region maintains a certain degree of autonomy and the right to independently decide how to organize life within its territory. This republic possesses a significant level of autonomy within Russia, and the standard of living in Tatarstan is noticeably higher than the neighboring Russian regions. Therefore, there is not too much motivation for Tatarstan to separate, but even if there were, there is one significant obstacle here: the lack of direct access to the sea. This is a substantial hindrance to maintaining economic self-sufficiency, which is a foundation of statehood. In reality, some northern regions that border the Arctic Ocean do have formal maritime access. However, for most of them, there is no possibility for large-scale shipping. Therefore, it's fair to say that the vast majority of regions in the country do not have reliable maritime access. Why is this important? Because when you attempt to establish an independent state, it's crucial to establish and maintain economic ties with the rest of the world. It's obvious that this could be done through the territory of either the remaining parts of Russia or other regions that have also declared independence. However, competition and the complexities of interaction with them can significantly vary based on various parameters. Another problem related to this is that unlike former Soviet republics, Russian regions do not have internationally recognized borders. In other words, during the Soviet era, republics had at least limited international subjectivity. Meanwhile, the borders between Russian regions are so blurred and unclear that it can lead to numerous questions. Additionally, in Russia, situations often arise where to travel from one point to another within the territory, one must pass through another region. Issues with infrastructure supply arise, where for example a power station may be located in one region but provides electricity to another region. Such situations also occur in other sectors such as water supply and etc., and they give rise to numerous misunderstandings, with not every republic willing to take on the task of resolving them alone. Another significant issue is neighboring countries. As Russia breaks into many small pieces, some regions, if they become independent in the European part of Russia, could potentially cooperate with the European Union and maybe integrate. However, for regions in the eastern part of Russia, the situation is entirely different. Even regions with abundant resources, but such small territories, will not be able to resist Chinese dominance. Eventually, they will become vassal states, highly dependent on China economically, socially, military, and politically. Many residents of Russia's eastern regions understand this risk and do not have an unwavering desire for secession from Russia at any cost. They realize that the European Union is far away and understand that if they will secede, they will become vulnerable to potential Chinese dominance. In this case, no one will be able to help them. Remaining within the Russian Federation is practically the only guarantee that they will not be absorbed by China individually. It's also worth noting that after the collapse of the Russian Empire in the 1920s, there was the Far Eastern Republic, created by the Bolsheviks as a buffer state to prevent the takeover of the eastern territories of the former Russian Empire by Asian states. It was not a democratic Far Eastern Republic that decided to separate from Russia on its own. On the contrary, it was a puppet state created to prevent Asian expansion. Therefore, the breakup of Russia is unlikely, because Russia is not at all like the USSR. Russian regions do not have internationally recognized clear borders. Most regions lack access to the sea, which raises significant questions about economic development. There are special cases with the regions of the Caucasus, the Far East, and the Republic of Tatarstan. The division of infrastructure will lead to a multitude of disputes, not to mention the division of nuclear weapons, armed forces, and so on. It would be pure chaos, with no internationally recognized borders, a multitude of infrastructure problems, and disputes and conflicts between everyone. That's it for now. You know who to share this video with. Thank you for watching, don't forget to like and comment this video. See ya.